Oh, we're not sure at all. All right. So we got right to gold. What is that economic policy? Oh, first off, what is the definition for economics? Yeah. How do you deal with scarce resources, and that can include business, money, whatever. What is the economic program of empires? I'm sorry, what is that called?
Mercantilism.
Yeah, I'm on. But by the way, my eyes are a little red. Last night, I had to leave about, I had to run someplace during halftime of the game last night. I was watching the game. And it did not go well. But I was with my jacket on, I was kind of flipping it over fast because I had to run outside, and I got my eye. Ooh. The zipper got my eye. You know, just popping whack. So my eye is now red. And that's always fun when you stick something in your eye. Actually, don't do that. I know it sounds romantic and you want to take your pencil. Don't do it. So that's what my eye looked at this morning, like, oh. It's not too bad, but it's right here, just a little bit. All right. Oh, was anybody awakened by a storm at 12:30 last night? Yeah. There was still hail in my backyard when I left for school this morning.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
At about 2 inches, 2 inches in some areas more hail. At 12:35. And then somebody, we got no hail at all. All right. So the program, the economic program said mercantilism, and they wanted to, what is the, let's write mercantilism up. What was the colony created for the separatists? I heard two different colonies. Is it Massachusetts or Plymouth? The separatists, not the Puritans. I heard both of them again. 1620, I heard enough, I heard more people say Plymouth. Plymouth was for the separatists, the Puritans. What city was the biggest city of Puritan Massachusetts? Boston. Even though for a while, Salem almost caught it. And who was kicked? Oh, what was that document to make sure that the non-separatists didn't cut their throat and go down to Jamestown? And who was kicked out of Massachusetts and started Rhode Island? Roger. Who owned, is Roger Williams for Rhode Island, who owned Pennsylvania colony? The crown gave it to him. For what religion? Society of Friends, everyone called them Quakers, and they started calling themselves. We've had two Quaker presidents. Herbert Hoover and Richard Nixon. And it's so weird, Nixon is a Quaker. Whoa. Okay. Okay, so going down to the next one. Oh, what did I give? Yeah, this name I took from other historians, but what did I call this area? Yeah, slave empire.
Why is that
Oh, they gave him the land claim all the way to the Pacific. Yeah, they gave Virginia land claim to the Pacific, Pennsylvania land claim to the Pacific. And no, they didn't bother to ask the people who lived there or another European powers who wanted to steal it too. When the country, after the United States became a country, they all competed in this land. It was almost the country just about fell apart right when it started. And so that's the slave empire. And so we got the mercantilism. We got the gold in. Is that what we're, did you say gold? I talked about why gold's valuable, right?
Yes.
We talked about tarnish, we went all through that. Did I say how countries make gold or how they make that? Taxes, yeah. So let's make sure we understand that. There can be no financial system without taxation. And in a modern country, so we're talking, 1650 to today. If you don't have your own financial system, if you don't have an exchange in your country, you don't have a country. Therefore, if you can't tax, you don't have a country. It just falls apart. It doesn't exist. It can't function. Yeah. That's that. Tariffs are tax. So they have the power to tax. So tariffs are tax, excise is a tax, sales tax, tax. I know what you're saying, but and Now, what you choose to tax, like for example, we have there is a myriad of ways in the United States taxes. One of them is an income tax. But an income tax before capitalism, like in this time, wouldn't have made any sense. So they didn't even use it because they wouldn't have computed. So there's old taxes don't really work today, and there's new taxes that wouldn't work. I mean, it's a good question, but tariffs are tax. So gold is a tax. Did I tell you what gold coin is? Oh, a big thing too, gold, you can stamp the name of your king or your empire or your country. It's soft enough to make it easy to stamp, but hard enough you can't just rub it off. Lead, you can almost like rub it off with your finger. Don't do that. Lead is shockingly toxic, especially if your brain has not been fully formed. It is like one of the most dangerous things you can do. Now, you're on the edge of being the smartest you're ever going to be in your life, the most intelligent, the most creative. Part of the reason, though, is because you're still developing. So don't eat lead.
But
write that down. Don't eat lead. See, I'm giving you life lessons. Don't pet a burning dog either. Life lessons. Yeah. Don't bog yourself down with questions. Just don't put the fire out. Don't pet. All right. Gold coin is called specie. This would be a good one when someone's walking down the hallway and I'm talking about don't pet a burning dog. And the first question is, is it on fire? That's actually a pretty good question. Let's ponder that. I'm going to go ask Mr. Minnie. He's probably what? I didn't have. He did. Species gold coin. And the value of specie is in the gold. So the coin has value. Coins in the United States now and every country, for the most part, they have no value. The coin itself. There's a tiny little bit of zinc in a penny. There's a little bit of nickel and if you met steel in a quarter. But specie. So the value's in there. And that's why they would have to weigh them. Because you can shade the coins and do all kinds of stuff. Oh, I should have. Here's story time now. You ready for story time?
yeah.
You ever seen a quarter? Have a quarter? I do have a quarter. Have a quarter. Pretty cool, huh? This is 25 cents. It's a quarter. Notice the ridges on the edge. Why? Shave it off to make the coin just a little bit smaller so they can make more coins. So you put the little ridges you can't shave. There's no reason to do that to these, but it just delays. Yeah, that's right. A few people know that. Had another class. Good story. You see that in every country. You see something like when the Roman Empire started falling apart, their coins were like paper thin. All right, so that's specie. What do you call either certificates, literally a piece of paper that says it's worth this much gold. We collect taxes so you can trust us. That piece of paper, or simply the fact that the government of the country says it is worth money, we promise, because we collect taxes and pay our debts. What is that piece of paper called? And that coin actually is that too. That's currency, yeah. It really is that simple. Currency, therefore, is the paper money. And since this financial system was so new, and they really didn't have a banking system and how to deal with debt, it was so new, and countries are bankrupt all the time. They would have to say, if we give you a currency, like in Britain, they're already using a pound as their measurement of currency. They would have to say it's going to be a pound of gold. This is eventually known as a gold standard. No, we are not on that now. So what Britain and the mother country wanted is to accumulate gold so they could have gold reserves and then issue currency and say, we promise it's worth this much money. You can trust us because we have this gold and we collect taxes. Yeah.
I was just going to say it's weird because the inflation of the dollar, it's worth the dollar and it's supposed to be a dollar in gold.
Then, not now.
Yeah. What I'm saying is like if you had it actually like right now, you shaved off a dollar or just had a dollar, they fluctuate price.
Because gold's not money. So that's nothing. Gold, gold's just a commodity. So it doesn't matter if gold goes up and down value or not. But gold goes up and down value because people still have this belief that gold is money.
When did the currency shift from gold to like disease traditional currency?
Okay, there really wasn't a set financial system anywhere in the world. The Netherlands was the first, then Britain and other countries followed. The U.S. you really can't say it's in the 19th century. Eventually they called that the gold standard. And for the U.S., they were on the gold standard until 1933. And then during the Depression, it was a disaster. So the U.S. went off it, and most countries would stay off it after the Depression and World War II. The U.S. kind of went back on it again in 1946, and then permanently went off of it in 1971. And so from then on, the dollar fluctuates with the bond, which actually, when you mentioned about gold going up and down in value, before we went down the gold center, it was really hard to control money. Money's much more stable not being based on gold. Which I know you think gold, it's like solid, we can hold it, but actually it's more stable. And so back to this. So they want to get as much gold as possible and make currency, and then they have their pound notes say, look, it's worth something. Because then if you print money, that gives you lots of flexibility. If you have gold and have to use only specie, you have not as much flexibility. So accumulate gold, you can print currency, have a financial system, you can borrow money, you can pay back your debts. Kind of a modern economy. But there's a finite amount of gold. They're not going to find a mountain of gold anywhere. And so what they did is this. It's through trade. Another word for trade, if you see it, is commerce. Commerce, trade, also mercantile. There's all kinds of names, but trade. So, trade. Don't think about individual businesses. Don't think about individuals selling goods, whether it be agricultural goods or manufactured. For the whole country, what do you call it when you sell a good made in your country and sell it to somebody else? What is that called? Export. So what do you call it when you buy from another country? Which do you want? As many exports. Ideally, no imports, only exports. Remember, it's all about gold. If you have to import goods, your gold pays for it. But if you export goods, gold comes in. And what is more valuable? Raw iron or the tools you can make from iron? The tools. So what you would want ideally is to export and want manufactured good. Now these are still goods for the most part made by people's hands. So this is pre-capitalism. It's not our economy. That's why I said income wouldn't have made any sense. You want as many manufactured goods as possible, or manufactured good. And that requires raw materials, so you would like that too. But maximize exports, minimize imports. Now, this actually is a pretty unstable way to do an economy. There's lots of problems with it, especially in a modern economy after capitalism. But there's still a country, a huge country, in many ways bigger than the biggest economy in the world. What country is mercantile? China. And it's becoming a disaster for China. China's economy is, to say they are in crisis is an understatement. Right now, China is they are looking down the barrel of a gun, their economy. And if China's economy goes down, this could really affect us. It could actually affect us in good ways or bad ways. But, because China, all they care about is exporting and they don't import. And so their economy within China is falling apart. Their real estate market is falling apart. And so this is not necessarily a good way, but all they're caring about is we just want gold. So how do colonies fit in? Yeah, so colonies will provide the raw materials. They will provide the raw materials. And you make sure that the raw materials only go to the mother country or MC. And it only go there. And so you tell Massachusetts they can't send their timber. And boy, was this a big deal, especially for a seafaring country. some of the trees, you can get planks that were 20 to 30 inches wide. They passed a law that nothing in the colonies, no board over 15 inches wide could be sold in the colonies. It all had to be shipped to England. England had cut down virtually their entire, every tree, their entire forest by the 70s. They cut everything. If you go to England today and see forests, oh, there's forests, it's beautiful. It's been replanted many, many, many times. You walk through a forest in England and every tree is exactly 12 feet apart. So you know what I mean? All right. So, and then here's part B. They take the raw materials, iron, wood, whatever it might be, or raw tobacco leaves, and they make the manufactured goods in the mother country, and the colonies will provide a captive market. You make sure that the colonies can only trade with the mother country. They can only buy those goods. So they ship their iron from the American Northeast, and the iron tools have to be bought from Britain. Or for that matter, the cloth or whatever it might be. And so everyone got that? Only from the mother country. They make sure that they can't buy their goods from France. Remember, the goal of this is to accumulate as much gold. And so the British, they're not saying this publicly all the time, but they're not looking at the colonies as, oh, a place for Englishmen can go there and see their rights. And you notice I said men, because that's the way they looked at it. I know they're skipping almost half the population. They didn't see it that way. They saw it as a place to suck as much money out as possible. That's what empires are. You conquer it, you suck the wealth out, and then you leave. And you do it through taxation. You tax goods going out, and you make sure you tax them so high they can't come in. So, if let's say Massachusetts can only sell their timber to Britain, what happens to the price of timber? Everyone got that? If they have only one person buying it, the price is low. So they're not getting very much money for this product. Everyone got that? They're not getting very much money for that. Now, what happens to the price of the manufactured goods? If the colonies can only buy from Britain, that means they can't get competition for goods from, let's say, France or Spain or the Netherlands. Or inside the colonies. They make sure the colonies, I almost forgot to write this down, no colonial manufacturing. No colonial. So you got to ship the raw materials. What happens to the price of these raw materials, of these manufactured goods in the colonies? Skyrockets. And so you might be thinking, they go to the colonies and just steal the gold. It's much more subtle. It's all done through taxation and trade policies. They suck the wealth out. One thing about the colonies, and this is going to be in every colonial empire. The colonies never have money. What do you call it when there's very little money in circulation? The value of the money goes up, but so what happens to prices? Prices go down, but if you have no money, who cares how low the prices are? What's this called again? Which one? Deflation. Deflation. Colonial America was suffering from horrific deflation. And so, anytime Britain tried to enforce the taxes, the taxes weren't high. But if you don't have money, any tax is high. If you don't have money. And so, that's why things like sales tax hurt working people a lot more than wealthy. Rich people love sales tax. Ooh, we have to pay. Most of our money goes untaxed. Poor people, everything's taxed. So, got that? That's the price here. And that's how they did it. That's colonial America. That's what every colony is going to try to do this. Now, Montana was a colony for a while. United States got this land claim from different places. They conquered it. They called them territories, but that's a colony. This is part of Louisiana, the Missouri, the Dakota territory we're in, and eventually this would become Montana territory. Become a state in 1889. But Montana, because it's mostly a lot of natural resources where people from out of this area come in to get the resources, Montana is very much like a colony. And we can see an example of what colonialism does. They go into a place and they suck the wealth out. Empires suck everything out. And when they leave, what do they leave? What's that? Say it again. Yeah, just, have you been to Butte?
Yeah.
They leave Butte. No. Butte used to have 120,000 people. Now it has, 25, and most of the people don't live inside Butte where people used to live. Butte's a big ghost town. It's got a massive toxic waste site in the middle of town. They literally left ruin. And you think any of that wealth stayed in Butte? None of it did. Think it stayed in Montana? No. They came in, sucked the wealth out, and left. Last 2 spring breaks ago, I went to Santa Barbara, California. I know, good story, huh? I went to this beautiful wetland. They had it's really cool. And this lake near Santa Barbara. And it was done by it was made with money from the granddaughter of William Clark. Has anyone ever heard that name before?
Yeah.
William Clark was one of the copper barons. He got, today he'd be a billionaire. Then millions of dollars. And they all moved to New York City, and that's where his recluse granddaughter, who died when she was in her 90s, had close to $1 billion, and she did nothing. She just had money. And it was all the money they sucked out of the ground from Butte and Anaconda. That's what colonialism is. So if you look at other parts of the world and say, boy, Africa's really poor. Why don't they get their act together? What are you talking about? Britain, France, Belgium, those countries, Germany came in and sucked everything up and left ruin, and then said, good luck. So, back here. So what did Britain do? Britain tried to do this beginning in the 1650s. Actually, after the king was executed, and this was done by the Republic for the short time, they passed a series of laws. You're going to see them called the Trade and Navigation Acts or just simply the Navigation Acts. And we'll get to the most important ones. First one, for exports from the colonies. So how do you keep exports? How do you control it, especially when you can't control everything? They put an excise tax on colonial goods. An excise tax. So they added a percentage. It was, the British didn't use the decimal system for money until 1971. So it was like a 5 pence per sterling tax, but it's not percentages. Their money made no sense till 1971. But they put a excise tax, so they added that. So every time someone in Virginia sold their tobacco, they had to pay 5 cents for every pound. Let's just say 5%, even though it's not quite 5%. That's how they collected them. That's an excise tax. You pay excise tax every time you get a gallon of gas. You pay about 70 cents of excise tax. So you look at the price of gas, 70 cents of that total is tax. You stay in a hotel, it's about 5% of the hotel cost is an excise tax. Taken off the top. So you just pay that extra. That's a tax. And you notice the gas, if you wouldn't look and see, look on the pump, they actually have the taxes listed there. But if you're not paying attention, you might not even realize it. So it's kind of, they call it an invisible tax. And then, what else do they do? Any goods on colonial goods must be on British ships and go through British ports. Why? So they collect the taxes. They collect the taxes. So that way, no matter what happens, any goods that the colonies do, any trade they do, it's taxed. Anything. They also put a tariff on that, but we're not going to worry about the tariff so much right now because it was so, this is still pre-industrial revolution. And then they passed a series of laws Well, I better tell you this right now. We mentioned tariff once before. There was a tariff, but it wasn't big, and that's a tax on imports. Any goods imported in. So what it means is the price for imported goods go up. So for example, President Trump, when he was president, by executive orders, by tax laws, the president could do this. He put in a large tariff on certain manufactured goods from China. So for example, if you want to go get a washer and dryer, it's about $500 more expensive in today's dollars than what it was in 2007. $500 or $600 more. It just has higher price. Now the thing about it is that I know most of you buy a washer and dryer 2 or 3 times a day, right? So you really notice when prices go up because you're always buying washers and dryers. Yeah, every day. Oh, it's noon. I need another washer and dryer. How often do you buy a washer and dryer? Yeah, 5, 10. I think the washer and dryer my wife has is like 12 years old. You know, so you don't notice that tax. There's a tax on certain types of computer chips from China, and that's actually increased the price of automobiles by about 3%. Price has gone up, and people don't, because of that tariff. Prices are higher because of other things. Anything with a computer chip, the price is higher because of that tariff. So, back to here. And then they put restrictions on colonial industry. Over the next 70 years, they would pass laws like the Hat Act. Anybody want to guess what they weren't supposed to make in the colonies? Shoes. And then they actually did pass the Shoe Act, but let's just go through the big ones. The Iron Act. Iron goods. Ship Act. The Ship Act was not just making ships, it was to do anything with the raw lumber that might be used for a ship. They wanted that all done in Britain. Oh, let's get one, last one. There's a bunch of them. We obviously don't need them all. The Molasses Act. What do you make from molasses? Huh? What? What did you say? Make cookies. I think they're pretty good cookies. What did they make from them? That was big money.
Rum.
Yeah, rum. People drank about 10 times more alcohol on average than people do now. They just get absorbed. That was just the norm. It was culturally different. It wasn't like they're binging and getting drunk. I'm not saying they're going to get drunk. It was just different. And the alcohol they drink had a lot lower alcohol. This was a big deal in the American Revolution. Alcohol. Huh? Actually, that's probably a myth. They didn't know that. People say that all the time now. I was told that in my European history class, and it turned out it's not true. Just like people say they didn't bathe back then. No, they bathed. They were clean. People were clean. Maybe not like today, some of us, but. So, Britain had India. India was known for its textiles. Now, I wear these really old, I'm trying to see if I can make these last 20 years. So I have 3 pairs of these pants. I'm going to go, they're going to see 20 years. I'm going to do it. I think I'm on 17. Pretty good, huh? But it also shows you how remarkable denim is. I mean, that's an amazingly strong fabric, and it comes from India. And when Britain got there, they realized, oh, we want to take this and bring it back to England. So what did they do? They took the process back to the textile mills in England and said they couldn't make it in India. And they put a big tax on it. So that's how they did it there. And with that, let's get to the next one. Could they enforce this? What are you doing? So, where was I? Could they enforce this, no, Britain? They pass all these laws? No, they couldn't enforce it at all. They passed them. It didn't work. Yes. And I was fine. Britain did all these policies. The colonists ignored them. This is going to be called salutary neglect. Anybody know what salutary means? We're not letter writers anymore. Just with computer and technology, people don't write letters. When they would finish a letter, they would say salutations, and then salutations. If I would write it J, that meant good wishes. Good. Salutary means good. So this actually benefited, ironically, it went against mercantilism, but it benefited the colonies and British business because it encouraged more commerce. So salutary neglect was a name historians gave it 200 years later, but we're saying this actually helped both Britain and the colonies. Britain didn't see it, but it helped them. And there are 3 reasons why they ignored it. The first one is the most obvious. It's so far away. That's why they had to set up the House of Burgesses. It's so far away, the colonists just, what are you going to do? Secondly, the colonists ignored it. Remember, they went there because they're thinking we are going to get our rights as Englishmen. Our rights. And you're now going to tell us they're going to suck our money out? Oh, trust me, the colonists all knew about this. They know what was happening. It's easy to tell. You never had money. You didn't have money there. And okay, most people in Britain didn't have money either, just went to the top. Lastly, Britain was always at war. They had a civil war, then all these wars for empire. They fought everybody. The Spanish, the Dutch, the Austrians, the Prussians. But what country did they fight most of their wars with? France. And so with this, the colonies could develop a unique economic system. They could develop, okay, 13 individual economies, well, 12 and then the Gators in Georgia. It was a Gator-based economy. Have you ever been to Savannah, Georgia? One of the neatest towns in America, but that's Savannah River, huge river. It's filled to the brim with gators. You're walking along, you see 15-foot alligators swim by 5 feet away. They're all tame, pet them, they bark. Don't blame me for your missing limb. All right, so with that, but they all developed. Remember, the plan was for the British to suck the wealth out. But instead, they're trading, they're setting up merchants, they're setting up their own governments, they're setting up their own laws. 13 individual colonies who, frankly, didn't like each other until they find a common enemy. And therefore, we're going to divide it up into something very simple. The northern economies and the south. And this is very generic, but I want to give you an idea that was what was going on. So in the north, we're talking about New England and the Middle Atlantic. South, the Chesapeake colonies and the slave empire. And when the Revolutionary War began, the population of the two were relatively close to the same. 1.25 million, 1.5 million in each. That will change dramatically because of these reasons. And one more thing about this that's important. Before we get to anything else, geography really affects everything. We live in Montana. We're not going to grow a lot of pineapples. So it really affects things. Mountainous. Okay, to our point of view, they might not seem like that taller mountains, but they're mountains right to the sea. Really pretty areas. But you're not going to have many of the really big areas, flat areas for farms. Where this Piedmont area is flat. Also meandering rivers, wider rivers, just different, fast-moving streams here. Totally different. So there's going to be lots of farms in both areas, but this would be much more conducive to the big farms. And then also, you can't grow tobacco once you get above it. In fact, you're going across Maryland, it's like literally you cross a line. This is tobacco area, not tobacco. Even if they're not growing tobacco, it's just everything's different. Like you just literally cross the line. Drive across Illinois, it's the same thing. So, terrain decides everything, geography. Also, the North has a big advantage. For 3 months, the growing season is a lot longer. But the weather's different, it's shorter, all kinds of things. So both are going to have, I meant to put small farms. The indentured servants, the small landlords, they're mostly going fruit, sometimes subsistence, sometimes they grow a little bit extra food. The bigger farms in the north, one of the things they grew a lot of were beans. Who do they sell those beans to? The south to feed themselves. And so even though, because their smaller farms was not conducive to plantation and therefore slavery agriculture, they're all interconnected. They are intertwined, regardless if they're slaves or not. All right, let's get back to the north. Because the north had the Puritans and the Dutch, there's more shipping, different point of view. There's a much larger merchant class, more merchants, more shops, more sales, more commerce, bigger velocity of money, even though there's no money in the colonies. Now, when I say a shop, it's nothing like a shop today. I mean, heck, if you were in Boston in 1760, you went into a merchant's store and you wanted to buy something as simple as an iron pot, there's no prices down there. You'd have to kind of bring it up and you would say, okay, I'm going to buy this. And they'll say, well, what money do you have? It's, well, I have a few Spanish pesos, I have some dollars, I have a pound, I have these notes from Boston Colony that said they're worth money. Do you get the point here? If we were put back in that time, we would just crawl up into a ball and cry. Because it would make no sense to us. Well, let me rephrase that. You guys would do that. I'm from a tougher, older generation. We could have handled it. No, we would have, no, this is awful. All right, so merchants. And there's going to be all kinds of products here. So we got trade, we got international trade. If you're trading across the sea, they're blatantly violating the law. They're shipping. And what do you call somebody who ships goods on the sea or any place, avoiding the law, avoiding the taxes? What do you call them?
Smugglers.
They could be pirates, but smugglers. One of the most famous smugglers in American history was this guy who would get rich off of smuggling. And he was kind of a pirate too. His name was John Hancock. Have you heard of John Hancock? He was the biggest signature on the Declaration of Independence. When the British tried to make him pay taxes, he became a patriot. So with that, we have an interesting history, don't we? Doesn't make it good or bad, it's fascinating. And with that, we also have timber, lumber, whatever you want to call it. Huge fur trade. A lot of ironworks. There was a huge hat industry there. Hats. You always see with hats on. Hats, big money. And I'm not going to put down banking. There were no banks. The first banks as we know it had been created, well, something like we know in the Middle Ages, but banks as we know it in the Netherlands in the 17th century. There were no banks in the United States, real banks, until 1791. And so people borrowed money, but you borrowed from merchants, you borrowed from creditors with wealth. And what am I missing here? Oh, and fishing was big business. Whaling is just about ready to explode. And they will kill almost all the easy to catch whales in the Atlantic in the next 30 years. And then they'll literally sail from Rhode Island all the way to the Pacific and stay there for 4 or 5 years in the next century, killing whales. Big business. We can keep going, but you get the point, there's a lot of different things here, right? Now, let's look here. There was timber. Different kind of trees, though. There's smaller trees in the south. More of them, but smaller, so they can't be used, they have to be used in different ways. All of our paper, about 90% of our paper comes from Arkansas. You ever been to Arkansas? There's just these little forests everywhere. And they get a full forest, it'll be grown in 20 years. Boom, forest. We live in Montana, how long does it take a forest to grow? 200, 300, no, but 40, 80, I mean, it depends on the rain. All right, so small farms. But what kind of agriculture is dominant? Obviously plantation. And if it's plantation, what were the big crops? Cotton was not yet a big crop. Too hard to grow, too hard to use. Sugar's a really good guess, but not in the American colonies. The only place you could really grow sugar is sugarcane. Sugar beets weren't quite there yet. Weren't used yet. And that's still a French one. Tobacco, yes. Let's spell tobacco correctly. Tobacco. Thank you, addictive drugs. What's the dye that would become really valuable in South Carolina? Indigo. Dyes are really difficult to get. That's part of the reason why everybody was kind of brown and black. Not because they wanted to be brown or black, but that was easy to, you get that dye from nuts from trees, it was really easy. Indigo dye, really hard to grow, really hard to pick, and it stunk. But it was worth its weight in gold. Indigo would be so valuable. In the next, or in the 19th century, but especially the 20th century, it's all chemicals. That would change everything. And then rice. Rice grown in South Carolina and sold, most of it was not sold in the Americas. It was sold down to the Caribbean for those who were being worked to death on sugar plantations. And then speaking of that, there's one more big money thing. Big money. Probably the most valuable in terms of money commodity in the United States in the first 70 years. It's human beings. And they had a lot of money invested in that. Slaves would not just be someone to work their crops. Slave was a commodity. And so you're in debt, you sell a few of the children, you get out of debt. And yes, that's what they would do. Or you need to borrow money, you know what collateral is. You literally sign a contract, but it's something you give if you can't pay back your, or something you put up as collateral, and if you can't pay back your debt, they take the collateral. You put up your slaves. Thomas Jefferson was an hawk. He never had money, but he always borrowed on his slaves. And he needed a luxury to pay it back, sold the kids. Yeah.
Do you offer yourself up as collateral?
No. Well, it's actually kind of weird. That's actually not quite true. That's what indentured servitude is. Yeah. And there are people who do that, you know, they're trying to leave the disruption in, let's say, Guatemala right now. They put themselves up. So yeah, actually, yeah, you can. Well, I said to them, oh, no, wait. Yeah. Which is kind of scary, isn't it? And so, you see how the different economies, let's say different economies would be created. So let's say it's 1780. 1785. So the Revolutionary War is over, but this is the basic economy. These 13 disparate colonies have come together. And desperate. Which would you go to? Let's say you don't have a lot of money. But you have enough to get over, but then you basically have to start from scratch. Would you go to one of the northern colonies or the southern colonies? Which one will give you the most opportunities? Most immigrants then to the United States would go to the northern colonies. So last thing we got to give for today, they would go to the northern colonies. So what's going to happen to the population in the next 80 years between the north and the south? Yeah, are you going to go work here and have a chance or go compete with a slave? The population here would be more than double the population in the south when the Civil War began. Think that would be decisive? Oh, one more thing. Let's say you're working. You get a job, and you've got a job, and you are working next to somebody who is a slave laborer. What does that do to your wages? Drops them. If you're competing with a slave, it drops them. Or you compete with child labor. Or let's say undocumented immigrants in the United States. It drops your wages. Why do you think that is an issue? And on that happy note, what are we going to do Monday? How many questions would you like? 6. So we got 10, 0, and 15. So 10,000 and 15. I'm not going to write that many. Let's go for 8. 7 or 8. Sounds good? I'll double them. Have a good day, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Don't jab anything into your eye. Go. Is that goat beard?
Yeah.
2 Peter the Great. See ya. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see ya. Dustin. Do you like Dustin or Dustin?
Dusty.
Okay, got it.
So enough to stab my eye with things, but that's what I love.
Newton was kind of.
You have to read each other.
We already read chapter 1 and 2.
Okay,
So you have to read chapter 3 chapter.
just, well, like I didn't read it, next time.
You have to have a rest
I
now.
have. But it's just 1 through 3, it's not.
But the quiz will be on chapter. Text from my wife.
Oh, you're good. I wasn't gonna text.
You were going to tell me?
I was gonna have you.
My wife is enjoying herself going to a concert in Denver. I'm working.
I saw that from her.
It actually is. She's seen her sisters. It's really cool. But I'm still whining about it. And the cheese looked horrible.